Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Mr. Andrew Trenton, who is the Assistant Director for the National Training Team with Education Services, and he will be taking you through today's content. Andrew, we are so grateful for your time today as well as your expertise. So I will hand it over to you now.
Right. Thanks very much, Elizabeth. I am Andrew Trianton. And yeah, I know that's really hard to pronounce, but it's what happens when you marry a French woman and her last name is cooler than yours. You steal it. It's very important. Normally, I am the Assistant Director for Training in Education Service. Right now, that's being temporarily filled by somebody else that I've delegated that to. And I'm currently the Acting Deputy Director for Operations, the Acting Assistant Director for Operations Integrity, and I think technically still the Acting Chief for Data Analytics. But once you get enough hats, like it just sort of melds together. And I assume that a lot of people in this training are in the same boat. So I'm imagining I'm in pretty good company here. Um, Next slide, Elizabeth. Thank you. We are going to be talking a bit about how to make a knowledge management strategy. That is going to be the main topic of this. I'm also going to hijack it a little bit because that's kind of what I do. We're going to talk a little bit about how to prepare for the unexpected on behalf of other people. And I'm also going to sneak in a little bit of contractualism because, like everybody in management that I've ever met, I read a book and I've decided that that book is applicable to all parts of life now. So everyone is going to have to hear my opinions on a book. Um, can I get just like a show of hands if you've had that experience in a leader before where they read a book and now everyone has to also understand that book? Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing some thumbs up. I'm seeing some hand raises. We've experienced this before. Uh, my book has a lot of big words in it, but it also has a TV show about it, so that should make it easier too. All right. Let's go on to the objectives. So we have some great action verbs here, which as a training person makes me super happy. That first one to recognize the role knowledge management plays. I don't think you guys are going to have a lot of difficulty understanding that one. That one's going to come pretty quick. But just in case you don't already, if you're reteaching everything, it's not a great use of your time. So that's why knowledge management is kind of important. The second bullet point is where I'm going to hijack this a little bit. Contractualism, if you're not familiar, it's a moral philosophy. I am not here to moralize at you, but there's some aspects of it that can serve as a pretty good framework for how to approach creating KM systems if you're not entirely sure where to start. I'm also not a moral philosopher. I am an English teacher who is pretending to be a middle manager in the government. So my take on this is going to be like really basic. So thankfully, we're probably going to understand it. And then that last one where we're going to assess processes, this is where you actually do something, take that concrete action. If you're, like every other human on the face of the earth, there's probably some spots where your KM could be better. We're going to find it, we're going to fix it, and then we're going to move on to the next one. Let's talk a bit about what knowledge management is. Just in case you're not sure why you're here, knowledge management, most of us are familiar with this in terms of, say, a procedures manual or a standard operating procedure. For my teams, this usually takes the form of some kind of automated system to track project workload, and then the associated documentation that goes along with those systems. I use a lot of markdown files, a lot of READMEs, things that step by step can tell people how to use a particular system to track a particular object through its life cycle. But I'm kind of interested at this point. What does it look like for you? What does knowledge management mean on your teams? Pipe up, people. We all talk for a living.
I think it involves a lot of ideas sharing and best practices, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're also very busy and our time's demanding. That one of the first things I do is say, "Hey, does anyone already have an established process for this?" Or if I'm needing to create some type of document, I'm able to reach out to my colleagues and ask, "Hey, do you guys have something that I can copy, so to speak?" And if I need to give credit, I'll be happy to give credit. But being able to pull all that information together, I mean, I might have an idea, but that doesn't mean I have the best idea.
That is a great way to put that. Like if you don't know what's already out there, ask first. If there is something out there that explains the procedure that you need, steal it because we're all supposed to be working together here. Um, and make sure that it addresses whatever need you particularly have. It's kind of like it's a shortcut, basically. If you have to explain how to do something every single time someone has to do it, you're spending a lot of time explaining and not a lot of time getting your own work done. So it's a bit of a shortcut there. And I'm seeing some things in the chat. Uh, Mike gives us compiling of past work products into a single place so that we can plagiarize ourselves to meet tight deadlines. I've never had that experience before. I'm sure no one else has either. But Hannah's giving us the extensive resources saved in organized folders on our shared drive and also a lot of team collaboration. That is a really good point to make, that knowledge management doesn't just come from the top. A lot of it is processes and procedures to make the actual valuable products, and those tend to come from your employees. Let's see, Anne's talking about knowing where to find when I need it. That's very important. You need to have a process to find the things that you're looking for before you can actually use them. Crystal's going straight for my heart, saying that she's using Power Apps to create tools that aid in the portfolio of work. Either she studied ahead or she just knows me too well, one or the other. Jaslin's giving us KM for her is her team knowing the expectations and sharing and showing work, clear guidance, consistent procedures, work that just never stops. And then Anthony has got that mining data and sharing systems data across platforms and organizations. I do love that too. There's a lot of stuff that we can get from the products that we make without even having to, pull it out of there manually or analyze it manually. Great stuff, guys. All right. Let's move on to types of knowledge and talk a little bit about that, because there's some of it that's going to work in a KM framework and some of it that's really, really associated to a KM framework. So we want to establish that difference. So our types of knowledge here, there's three that we're going to talk about. The first is tacit knowledge. That's those things that don't really work super well in a KM environment because they're often like unpredictable or they're specific to a piece of software. So in my experience, one of my data teams has this forecasting model, and we use it to predict claims volume for education service for the rest of the year, and sometimes for future years as well. If you export that file into an Excel file, it will not give you any future dates, which completely ruins the entire point of the project. But if you export it to CSV, it'll give you all the future dates that you want. So the tacit knowledge there, you sort of find out through experience, is how many times can I press this button and fail and then change one thing and find the way that it doesn't fail? And I don't know why it does that. I don't know why it only exports the future dates to CSV. The guy who made the report doesn't know why. We just kind of know that for some reason, CSV does it and the other stuff doesn't. Implicit knowledge is a little bit different. It's something that comes from experience, but can also be something that's taught to you, peer to peer kind of. So I'm going to use an example that's going to embarrass Elizabeth here because she put this slide deck together. She does this great thing where she balances the visuals on a slide to suggest a connotation with what the text is without overwhelming what the text is. You'll see a lot of people doing this in VA completely incorrectly, and it drives me nuts. They fill the slide with text instead of remembering that there's no budget for slides. We can have as many slides as we want, put a few words on it, stick a picture that also implies that so that it sticks in your mind and suggest what that theme is going forward. So thank you, Elizabeth, for doing that really well. And I'm going to move on to the explicit knowledge. So this is the work part for us. This is where you have tasks that are accomplished the same way every time. If there's a procedure that you can write down for people, that's generally what they are supposed to follow. So my example here is back in the olden days, when we still had an ALM contract and we could use our learning management system, I wrote a procedure for how to update the user list in there every day. And most of it was automated, but there were a couple of spots where a human would have to, press the upload button or something like that. So I wrote up a procedure for it in a README file, stuck it into a repository where everyone could access it, and then I didn't have to be the one that updated the user list every day. because anyone could follow those instructions. They knew which buttons to push, and they could move on from there. Yours might look really different. It looked really different when I got here. When I got here as the AD of training, the staff assistant that had been hired had been here for a few months already, and no one had given her any direction. So because she's amazing and knew exactly what to do, she wrote this gigantic OneNote full of all these procedures that should have been documented before but never were. And if you know me pretty well, you know I hate OneNote, but hers was so good and it was so straightforward that the format didn't matter. Just because it wasn't a markdown file or something in a GitHub repository like I'm used to or a website, it doesn't matter. The important part is that she wrote down the procedures. They were easy to find, easy to follow, and I could get what I needed from it. So I'm going to talk a lot in this training about automated bots, Power Apps, READMEs, Markdown, that sort of thing. That doesn't mean this is the only way to do it. If you do it with OneNote, if you do it with Word, if you do it with a plain text file, totally fine. The important part is that you can access it, find what you need, and do it. All right, and I feel like this slide has an animation on it if I'm remembering right, so let's just see that right away. Yeah, there we go. We kind of talked about this a little already, bodies of knowledge that you work with at the VA. Can I just see in the chat, what's your most used piece of knowledge? What's your most explicit knowledge? What type of knowledge do you use? Like, I bet for a lot of you, it's going to be VA handbooks. Before recent events, a lot of it was probably the master agreement. I know I use the VA handbooks a lot. VA financial policy, Carlos, Mike, it's all about the SOPs. Good stuff. Yes, Amy's got the VA handbooks, the GPPA policies, procedures, and employment law. Good stuff. That'll definitely keep you awake at night. The narratives are just amazing. Louisa, going right after my heart with the AP style book. I knew I liked what you wrote for a reason. Bill's referencing previous experience, mostly from keeping Andrew getting himself in trouble. That is unfortunately too true. I'm sure you have tons of notes on that. Past experience for Mr. Cross. And some more VA handbooks from Ms. Foxworth. Great stuff, guys. I appreciate it. All right. Let's move on to another slide where I'm going to grandstand for a little bit because I really enjoy doing that if you haven't picked that up already. We're going to talk a little bit about why knowledge management is important. Now, you notice on this slide, there is a visual that balances the small amount of text. I'm not going to go into it, I swear. I'm just always very impressed when I see one of these done well. In any case, the big thing here is that your people are going to leave. Like now more than ever, a lot of people have probably left you already, and a lot of them are going to continue to leave. We are not in a time period where people tend to stay where they are at. It is really important at this point, more than ever, that you're doing everything you can to support the people that you have, because that's what will make them stay, and then also to create systems that support the rest of your people when someone is no longer here. Say, for instance, you have someone who's assigned an ancillary task. You've written a README for that task so that it's doable. That person gets another job somewhere else and they leave. It shouldn't just be that one person that knows how to do that task. That person should be able to reference guidance that they, can use to get that task done so that that task continues to get done until you can hire somebody else, assuming we're ever allowed to do that again. If you are in leadership at any level, you should probably already understand that your job isn't about you. And if you don't understand that, please begin to understand that. What it's about is giving your employees everything that they need to accomplish the mission. That is your role. In this particular case, it's providing systems and processes that give people kind of a leg up on a new position or that better explain their current position. Again, assuming that we're ever allowed to hire again. This is kind of the core of a philosophy that I refer to as self-loathing leadership. You've probably heard of servant leadership, acting in a servant model. For me, self-loathing leadership is using your internalized self-hatred to make your employees' life better. And that generally works out pretty well when you have a lot of employees who need a lot of things. Look for my book someday. Someone can read that and it can inform their whole philosophy on how they lead people. Hopefully not too many because it's going to be really depressing, but hold out for that. All right. And then the last thing is kind of where I'm starting to introduce a really surface level knowledge of contractualism. Understand that when you talk to one of your employees, whether you like that employee or not, everyone that you are employing is a rational creature that is just like you. At the very least, they fall into this normative domain of duties that you bear all rational creatures just because they are also a rational creature. How you must act, how you must design your systems to act has to be rooted in the meeting of that duty. Your duty to rational creatures is to support them the way that you expect to be supported in return. Now we're moving on to the part that, we can break this into things that are objective worthy, less grandstanding, but it's also like the slide where you actually get something out of this too. Again, that's not the point. You're not supposed to be worried about what you get out of this. It's about your employees, but this also does help us, which isn't bad. When you spend less time training people, you spend less time onboarding them, you give them the systems that they need that can tell them how to do things, then you can spend more of your time doing things like making sure those procedures are followed, making sure that it's being tracked appropriately. And if you're like me, making sure that the bots that you made to track all this stuff aren't broken and aren't using themselves incorrectly, so you don't have to fix them. I run into that last problem kind of a lot. I'm sure this is being recorded so they can use that against me later. But when they do work, they're pretty exciting. The other thing that I'd kind of like to point out here is that accountability and evaluation and risk management both kind of go together. That if you keep people accountable to the system that you wrote, if they inform themselves of that system and they're part of creating that system, you're going to get more consistency and compliance too. If they are empowered to write a system that works with what you are looking for, it's almost like self-determining governance. It sort of takes me back to my English teacher days where I was teaching a 7th grade class and the cooperating teacher in there was like, well, these people, they hate rules. They don't want to do anything. They talk all the time. And I kind of flipped it on them and said, all right, we're going to create some rules, but you're going to be in charge of it. What do you want to be the rules in this classroom? And they made up some pretty great rules. Things about being respectful, waiting for other people to talk. And then they enforce those rules themselves because they're rational people who can do that and they can come into a contract with everyone else and understand that everyone else is just as important as they are. Am I beating that over the head enough? Yeah, I swear I'm only going to do it for like one more slide. All right, let's go. I see it now. All right, so this is my hijacked contractualism slide. If you're going to get people to care about knowledge management, you can't just point to it excessively and be like, now you have to do knowledge management because this is the thing that I wrote. First, you have to care about it yourself. If it's your job to be in charge, it's your duty to value your employees as human beings, and it should drive you to create and maintain systems that make them feel respected and valued. In turn, they're going to feel that duty to you. First, because you are also a rational creature, and second, because you're the one who treated them with the respect that they deserve, and they are a part of making the knowledge management systems that make their job work. If you don't feel that sense of owing something to your employees, they're unlikely to feel any obligation to you in return. If you just, work from on high and dictate to them what they're going to do, they may or may not do it, depending on the type of person that they are, but they're not going to do it as, a fully fledged participant inside of that process. When you're creating these knowledge management systems, the first question you want to be asking yourself is, how will this improve the work lives of the people that I am responsible for? Because you are responsible. When you build the system, that's a collaborative effort, but ultimately the system existing and being deployed is something that you owe to your employees because they're the ones who are making things of value, the products, the training, the reports, things that people look at and send off to Congress. Your employees make those things. If we make the systems that help them make those things, then we are doing our job correctly. If they make those things using our systems, then they're doing it correctly too. All right. Oh, Mike's got a really good point in the chat. Failing to build in a collaborative fashion is a wonderful way to tank your perception of psychological safety. Absolutely. You want a collaborative opportunity to build something together because there's ownership and people know that whatever the final product is, they've had a say in it. They've determined what's actually worthwhile. And then this is the slide where Elizabeth and Simone told me that I needed to talk about myself. So I'm sorry in advance, but I'm going to tell a little story. I have a habit of finding myself in places I didn't expect to be to include the current situation that I'm in. Back in like long, long ago when I still had dreams, I was supposed to be a high school English teacher. I may have mentioned that twice already. On the first day that I was a high school English teacher, I was sitting in this classroom prepping a lesson between classes, and 10 or 15 students just started wandering in, and I had no idea what they were doing there. They were sitting at random desks. I kind of figured their teacher would show up momentarily, they would teach the class, and the teacher never arrived. The teacher never got there. The teacher never showed up on any day. And I ended up being an epistemology teacher for that semester too. Not a subject that I had more than like a passing familiarity, but because I was in the room, it became my job. I was kind of lucky on this. I had a roommate at the time, and she was taking an epistemology course and doing a minor in it, and she was a really obsessive note taker. So all of her notes were super well organized. All of it was easy to follow, and she let me use all of them when I was planning my lessons and when I was trying to make this actually work. So as a result, I ended up teaching a pretty good class that semester because someone was willing to create a knowledge management system that helped me to understand the topic that I was supposed to be teaching at a level that I could teach it to high school students. Now, would I ever call myself an expert in epistemology? That's a no. But if you're teaching it at a surface level to high schoolers, good enough. All right. Oh, I suppose I should mention that last bullet point because, of course, a place where you find yourself in an unexpected position. At the end of that school year, the state government made some decisions about the budget that I wasn't super thrilled about, and they ended up firing me and all of the other new teachers. So, of course, I didn't get to be a teacher for more than that, particular year. But I did leave behind that system that my roommate had given to me. I made lesson plans, I gave materials, and I filed it in the spot where the next person who unexpectedly finds themselves being an epistemology teacher will at least have something to work on. If you're not here, the knowledge management system must remain because that's what you owe to the next person that's going to come along and have to do that whole task. So that's important. Currently, giving a more work-related example here, um, it's difficult sometimes to remember how February went. I assume that this is difficult for some of you as well. For me, it came with some pretty severe and awkward changes that I was not prepared for. And I assume that I'm probably not alone in that. For me, the other assistant director in my division took the DRP along with one of the chiefs, and my boss, the deputy director, had to go on maternity leave. So it left me with 3 more jobs than I usually have. And between you, me, and the rest of the world, I can usually do one job kind of okay. 4 jobs is more than I can do. I was planning on falling apart and having a complete psychotic break, but instead of doing that, I had the good fortune of having employees that came to me directly, and they were brave enough to tell me exactly what they needed. For my quality teams that I run now, their administrative error decisions had been backed up for months. So no one had been signing those and no one had been reviewing those. And if you've ever seen me review a paper, it's a painful process for everybody involved. So those went pretty slowly, but they got done. They were also kind of relying on this series of nested SharePoint folders. So for each regional office, they have their own folder for each fiscal year, for each quarter. And once you get down to like the third subfolder, people are going to start screwing up where they put those files. So I created a system that removed that issue. The solution, the solution that indexes, what's it called again? I actually forgot what I did this. Yeah, the solution for indexing error resolutions and remedies and adjudication. And yes, I came up with the acronym before I came up with the words that the acronym defines, but that's what Sierra is. Sierra lets a regional office upload a PDF to one folder. It auto sorts it to the appropriate subfolder automatically, and then it assigns it to the chief of National Quality Assurance to assign out to one of her people to review. Once it's reviewed, they can either send it back to the person who gave it to them and say, hey, I need these fixes. And if they don't think it needs any fixes, they can send it to me for final signature. All of that takes place in Teams through automated adaptive cards, and none of it involves a human having to move a file at any point. The idea behind it was to both remove the error of sorting these things incorrectly, and also remove the dependency on email, having to email these decisions back and forth. A bot can do that. You don't need a person to do that. And then you can focus on what's actually important. Was the adjudicative decision correct? If it wasn't correct, did we fix it? Did we cite everything appropriately? And can I sign this in good faith? We have seen a significant uptick in correct administrative decisions since this has been implemented. I now have 0 administrative decisions pending because it's so easy for me to see every day what's waiting for my signature and what's not. The other section that we were really getting behind on was managing SharePoint tasks that are assigned to us from the front office. If you're in a VACO office, you're probably familiar with this sort of thing. There's always some staff or some person with a SharePoint that captures all of the emails that everyone else wants to send you for all the things they want. And that can get a little bit overwhelming. People forget to check the SharePoint site. People don't read the email because there's 67 of them a day, and it tends to get lost. So I designed, in this case, the Resolution for Operations Managing ESCR Organizer. And yes, again, the acronym was thought up before I actually defined it, but that's Romeo. And Romeo is a bot that shows up every day and he tells me what tasks I'm responsible for giving to other people. We'll show it to you in a minute and you can get kind of a better idea of that. But the idea was that I can't forget these things because it's telling me about them every day and I can take action on them every day based off of, what I have in front of me. Oh, we are at demonstration time. All right. Before I get into this, I want to pause for a second and just ask if there's questions. What questions do you have about anything that I've said so far? What are we thinking out there? And yes, Mike, I can spell epistemology. Thank you. But only if I'm in a really good place and I've had all my coffee. All right, no questions? Man, I'm doing great. You will probably have some after the demonstration, or at least I assume so. So I'm going to take over and share my screen now, if that's okay, Elizabeth. And I'm going to let people see what Romeo looks like. And let's just take a look here. So as I'm sharing this, can I ask you guys, has anyone used an adaptive card before? Or has anyone used Power Apps before to send themselves things in Teams? Daniel, Donna, I really appreciate the bravery. No, we have not.
Would you
Tonya, thank you
define,
too.
would you please define Power Apps?
Yes, that is a really good point. So Power Apps, it's a Microsoft program generally designed to automate or store data. So there's a significant amount of sub applications that are focused through it. What we are going to mostly talk about today is Power Automate, but that's just kind of the one that I'm the most familiar with, Power Automate and Power BI. If you've ever heard of a Microsoft with the word power in it, it is probably under the umbrella of Power Apps, where I think Microsoft calls it Fabric now for some reason that none of us can fathom. But could I get a confirmation that everyone is seeing the little chat window?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So this is what Romeo looks like when I come in the morning. It shows up at 8 o'clock and tells me what things are due for me. I can refresh that list, and I usually do around noon just to see if someone else has given me something else to do. And you'll notice that a lot of these things are red. That means that they are either due today or they are overdue. Thankfully, everything in here that's overdue is an internal task, so no one's going to be yelling at me about it, but it is stuff that I have to get on. One of the first things I usually do is I filter this list so that I can just see the things that other people are expecting from me, and that'll display a different adaptive card that removes all of those internal tasks and just shows me the things that are pending for other people. And that's a much more manageable list. So today, at some point, we need to take care of task 021930 CBO Holland, blah, 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 6 other words that probably don't mean anything to anybody. But if I want to work on that task specifically, I can just click this happy little notebook, and it's going to retrieve all the details of that task for me and tell me what's going on. So here's all the updates that people have written about it. Right now, one of my analysts, Tanika, uploaded the August files. It looks like the trainee count still needs some work for Chapter 30, so I'm not going to sign off on this yet. But if I wanted to take a look at it, I can click this little Docs button, and that'll take me to the documents inside of SharePoint itself. And they are always going to be the ones that are just associated to that task. And I'll go ahead and share my screen so you can see that. So that's gone ahead and brought me to the documents folder that's associated with this. Here's all the files that I'm going to be reviewing later for this task. And once I'm done, I can also use the bot, assuming that I can click on the right thing, to reply to that task, put whatever my words on it are, submit it, and then it'll put that inside of these updates, and it'll remove the assignment from me and take it out of the Romeo list. But for now, since it's not quite ready, I'm going to go back to the list and work on that one later. This is a demonstration of what is a scheduled Cloudflow, which means that it happens for me every day. This also happens for several of my chiefs every day for things that they are assigned to, including my data analytics chief, which is why we knew about this task and why we got on it to the point where it is going to be done on time. This was a large problem when I came on board that most of these tasks were not getting done on time, but having something that tells you what to do all the time, that says, hey, these are the things that you're responsible for, these are the things you have to work on, and a nice, easy interface to work through them tends to make it a little bit easier. There are, I want to say, something like 12 of these now that work for several members of different staffs, but it's really all the same flow, just assigned to different people. All the way up to the executive director, he gets his every day too. And his assistant also gets a paired bot called Juliet that has the same tasks on it so that she can respond to some of those for him. Sierra works in a similar way, but unfortunately for all of us, because I know you guys would have wanted to see tons of things in Sierra today, it does not actually have any administrative errors for me to look at right now. When it does, I get a list and I can make decisions on them. But when it doesn't, all I can do is just view the report that's associated with Sierra. But thankfully, that report can tell me what the error trends were, if there are any ones that are currently pending. Looks like one is in a status of returned right now, so I'll probably get that one later this week, and then we'll move on from there. Who has questions before we build one? Oh, TC, thanks for that chat. That it streamlined efforts and helped your executive review team. Yeah, I forgot to mention, Romeo also sends emails at noon and 6 a.m. for everyone who prefers emails instead of Teams chats. But that was the easier part of this, thankfully. All right, I'm gonna do something a little bit unconventional for me. I went ahead and set up a different flow this morning using the registration list from this particular class, and I built it in Power Automate really simply. Uh, I called it, use the TMS number and called it pester. What it's intended to do is to email, or not email, I'm sorry, I wouldn't do that to you guys, but it should message each person that was inside of this particular list and say, hey, you want one of these bots, this is how you do it. And then we're going to build one together. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. And because there's kind of a lot of you, it might take a few seconds for it to do it. But even if it does, sending an automated message through something like Power Automate takes so much less time than trying to write it all yourself and then make sure that everyone gets it, because it's easy as a human to forget things. Or maybe you're all perfect, it's possible. I'm not, and I forget things, people, names, faces all the time. So it may or may not get there if I'm the one in charge of it. This is a program that thankfully all of us have access to in one way or another. And eventually, when it gets around to all of us, it'll send a message directly to you. Might actually take a while now that I think about how many people are in this class, but in any case, it'll get to you eventually. Let's go ahead and see what it looks like when we actually build one. And I'm going to build one that's pretty simplistic and straightforward. You just go to this Power Automate site, and we'll go ahead and share this with you as part of the class. You hit New Flow, and then you just sort of decide how that flow is going to be triggered. The one that I made up for this class was an instant cloud flow, so it triggers whenever I tell it to trigger. An automated cloud flow is usually based off of something that happens outside of your control. So think of when a SharePoint list gets modified, or when you receive an email with specific keywords or something like that. Those are really useful to sort of cut down on the clutter that you guys have in your inboxes, I'm sure. I'm going to stick with instant for now, just because it's easy. I'm going to say that we're going to manually trigger this cloud flow. There's, of course, other ways to do that. And the actual building of it, I'm going to use the new designer for. Oh, my bad. I have to give it another step first. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. So I'll just give it a little fake step that I usually start with. Fake variable, no actual value. Save that, and then we'll switch to new designer. There are a lot of things that are broken in the new designer on this thing, but I am desperately trying to get used to it, because if you're familiar with Microsoft, they often get rid of things that you depended on, like right when you need them. So trying to get myself used to this one. If I wanted to do something where I sent, say, like an automated email, I can type something in this search box to add an action like email. And let's say you want to send people, I don't know, the minutes of a particular meeting or something like that. Sending an email in here is pretty simple. Doesn't really require you to know any code, which is usually where people tend to get lost. Knowing some code is helpful, but it's not required. You can send this to anyone that's in your organization. So if I wanted to send this to Bill, I can do that by searching for him. Oh gosh, I guess he doesn't exist in the VA Gal. I'll send it myself. I think I'm the only Tleonton around. There we go. You can also use what's called dynamic content in here. And I do this a lot because I have databases that are built to track like who the people on my staff are, what their position titles are. And sometimes I'll filter these things by those position titles so they're not stuck on a singular person. So if, say, one of my analysts leaves, it doesn't break everything, because a new analyst will come in and it won't be based off of their email address. It'll be based off of that position, and it can still send that person the task or the email or whatever. But all this really requires is that you type out the things that you want in there. You can even add hyperlinks without knowing any code. It has extra parameters in here if you want to CC people or BCC. If you want to add attachments, you can totally do that too. And again, the attachments can also be dynamic content. So if you have some kind of content that changes every day, you can make it part of this attachment. But once you're done filling out required fields, all it's ever going to do is ask you to test that flow. It'll save. Using regular connections here that all of us have in the VA. And then once we click run, it'll start working. So in 0.7 seconds after I sent that, it's now sending me an email. And look, it even got here. This isn't too impressive on its own as a flow, but if you can sort of imagine the possibilities, that's how we get to things like that email that TC was mentioning with the morning task email. Every morning, that task email pulls in the SharePoint list. It translates it to a cute little HTML table. It tells you when stuff is due for the next few days, and it gives you a link for any particular task that you're set with. So if you say prefer email over getting messaged an adaptive card every day, that's fine. This was super easy to write. I think it was only like 7 steps, but I can find that same CBO Holland task here too, and it'll still take me directly to that task if I want it to. All right, so I'm going to stop again there and ask you, what questions do you have? Oh, looks like I have some stuff in the chat here. That's fun. Let's see. Elizabeth mentions these are knowledge management things that work for me and my team. Yours might look different. That is a really good thing to point out. I do this because this is what makes sense to me, and because automating things that bore me are just usually part of what I do. If you prefer to write a Word document, if you want to write a OneNote, there's no problem with that, as long as they're giving your people the solutions that they need to do their jobs correctly. Charles has, can this be used to track formerly known as inside of documents, PowerPoints, memos, policy documents? Be helpful when a name changes. We can use it to scan and replace words and SOPs. Oh, Charles. Charles, that is such a great question. So as part of one of my administrative decision flow in Sierra, administrative decisions are always sent to me as a Word document. And Word documents, if you're not aware, they aren't actual files in and of themselves. They're zip files. There's XML in there that contains all the text in them. There are image files and media files that contain all the images you embed in them. So if you ever try, you can unzip a Word document and get all of its component parts. So I use a flow to pull the XML out of those administrative documents, and I scan for specific words in there. So you can absolutely scan for something like, Charles, who was formerly known as Barry. You can look for Barry in there and have it completely replaced. Like, that's absolutely something that you can do. You might have to store it in a variable and then have it rewrite that Word document or that PowerPoint, but that's absolutely something you can do. It's just a little bit complicated and super fun. Mike has a question for me. Does building or running these bots have an effect on the egos of people who feel the need to weigh in on every little detail of a work product? I'm not 100% sure which way to take that one. It certainly makes me feel super egotistical when something works and super ashamed when something doesn't work. The effect it has on other people is sort of the same effect that I've seen my entire life. I make something, I give it to people, they criticize the thing, and then I try to make it better to meet what needs they have. That's part of the contract, is that I see them as rational people, they are bringing me their rational concerns, and I try to make the product meet the needs that they say that it meets, because that's my part of it. And I'm hoping I'm understanding that correctly. And then, is it true that Microsoft removes helpful? Oh, it is true that Microsoft removes helpful things, but I think we can all agree on the death of the paperclip. Yeah, I'm good with that. I don't miss it. All right. Daniel mentions the transcription being useful. Gosh, I hope so. Can you recommend training materials to learn more about the automation? I absolutely can. One of the best things about this, and I hesitate to give Microsoft any praise because it's just not a thing that I'm used to doing, is that Power Automate itself and Power Apps itself comes with an entire section about learning. So I'm going to put that in the chat for you, and it'll guide you through exercises that will give you, sort of an overview of everything that this can do. And there are a million ways that you can use this to make your life better, some of them easier than others. And if you're like me, you'll start with a problem, you'll bang your head against the wall until your brain isn't so stupid, and then you'll try to eventually solve it. You'll do it the wrong way. And then 16 other times later, it'll start working. So that's how I usually approach it. I would highly recommend using the learning thing instead if you're not so used to being frustrated all the time. Yes, Bill, that is my mom's old saying, try again, fail better. Such a inspiration to us all, of course. What else do we have? Is there any kind of like automation that you guys would like to see? One of my favorite classes back in the day when I taught rating was higher level SMC and just taking specific SMCs from the audience and coding them. Is there anything you guys would want to see in here? A task that you have to do all the time that's super monotonous? My usual rule is if I have to do it more than 3 times a week, I can probably figure out an automation for it. And it gives me more time to focus on things I actually care about. No, nothing? Okay. Feel free to reach out to me anytime and I'll get you started. There's also the whole Digital Transformation Center. They have a whole cadre of people that are willing to help with this sort of thing. They even have weekly office hours where they show how to do things. So if you start working around in those, what do you call it? Or if you start working around in Power Apps and you start asking questions of DTC, they will happily reach out to you and help you, and they'll probably add you to that office hours. Oh, Elizabeth, that's a great one for tracking leave requests. I actually wrote one for that a long time ago that no one ended up using. Wonder if I still have it. Now you've got me going down a rabbit hole. I love it. I haven't had a rabbit hole to go around in a while. And it was a problem that I could actually solve, which always makes me happy. I was also using these back in the day to have people submit their evaluation feedbacks on training. And that was always a great time. It was working pretty well before we lost the ability to automatically get that information. Doesn't look like I have that flow anymore, but I can tell you that there are many ways to do this. What I would probably start with is a Microsoft Forms trigger. So if you guide people either to a Power App or a Microsoft form to make their leave request, you can take all that data, have them confirm it, and then put it in. How I usually do this, and I don't recommend this because it was so frustrating, is I set up one that triggers off of every time I put a leave request into whatever they call VTAS these days. And every time the email arrives, it says, Andrew Tléonton has put in a leave request for this, that, or the other thing. It pops up another little adaptive card that says, hey, do you want to pick off who you're having substitute for you? Is this leave request correct? And then it automatically sets my out of office, emails my supervisor to say, hey, I'm taking this leave, and it goes from there. So I can briefly show you that one. See here. And if someone can let me know when they can see, that'd be awesome.
Yep, we got it.
All right. So this is one that I made for myself, and of course it can work for other people depending on what you do. I called it Hegon after one of our training analysts that I really liked working with. But what it's doing is this is an automated Cloudflow. So it only triggers whenever a VETAS email comes in and it comes to my inbox and it has the subject filter leave request submitted. But as soon as it does that, it converts the email into plain text because most emails that you get are probably HTML. So converting them to plain text helps a little bit. I initiate a fair number of variables in here. In this one, I put this delegates in here for people that work for me that I can use to delegate authority to. This one removes a new line, so that does take an expression, which I guess could be considered coding, but you could probably find a way to do it without it. I compose a bunch of dates, the from date, the to date, extracting things from that email. And then what it looks for, it has this nice little condition. And if you're familiar with like if-then statements, that's sort of what this thing is doing. So for me, it's if the body of the email contains my name and it says has submitted a leave request, because I don't want this to trigger if I've submitted a premium pay request. I don't want it to trigger if someone else has, put in a leave request and that sort of thing. And then from there, I get the people that work for me as my delegate rows. It creates this array of delegates, sets it as a variable, and then it posts this happy little card for me, which I think I can show you guys without actually running this, depending on how I coded this. And I did this as a card, but you certainly don't have to. Yeah, if I just change this to quotes, we should be fine. Yep. It posts this little date range based off of the variables, the time range based on that variables, and then the leave type, because that all comes in on the VETAS email. And then it asks me if I want to set up automatic replies. So if I hit yes, it drops down these little things and says, hey, when do you want to start sending automatic replies? Pick a time. When do you want to stop? Pick a date. What time would you like to stop sending them? Pick a time again. And then finally, it takes that list of delegates and says, hey, do you want to delegate your authority to somebody? And then from there, it sends the email to my supervisor and to anyone else who's being delegated authority. Puts the out of office in there automatically that says, hey, I'm not here. Refer to person that I delegated authority to. I'll be back at this time. And then it also sends an email to our exec review box so that they know I'm not going to be here, so that they don't assign any tasks to me. This is an overly complicated way to solve a very simple problem, but it made me so happy that I think it was worth it. It is also something that you can absolutely do. If you want some help, I can send you the card. If you don't like the cards, you can do it over email. Fairly simple to put together, though. The irritating part was extracting all the little bits out of the VETAS email, because those emails are really difficult to use. But in any case. Oh gosh, I totally forgot the useless stuff passage of time. Thanks, Mike. Charles mentions, do you have a tool that shows if someone is in or out of the office? So that's actually something you can get from email. So if you set up a trigger, to say every day at 5 a.m. or something like that, then check Outlook to get party status. If they have an out of office up, it will tell you that they have an out of office up and they will show as out of office. I actually used that inside of the Sierra thing, so that if Sierra detects that my NQA chief is out of office, it'll instead assign her bot to me so that I can keep administrative decisions moving because she reports to me. So that's absolutely something you can do. And then a tool that tracks budget, showing like a starting budget, tracks approved spending with IFAMs. You would need something from IFAMs that shows that without using IFAMs. So if there's an email that it sends or an export you can take, you can definitely use that. That could be a bit more complicated, but if you want to talk through it, please feel free to reach out to me, Charles. I can probably help you out. All right, and Elizabeth, you putting the PowerPoint on means I think I'm probably getting pretty close to my time here. So I need to talk about the steps to get started. These ones should be pretty straightforward if you guys have been paying attention for the past hour. And I feel like all of you have, because you've been giving me some great comments. So if you are first going to identify your type of knowledge and documents that you need, before you even do that, I'd start to think about what kind of knowledge management system you are comfortable building yourself. I am comfortable doing it in these Power Apps because it's a system that I know and it's a language that I know. If yours is Word or it's OneNote or whatever, don't be afraid to get started with that. You can always convert it to something else if you want to change it later, just like I can convert mine to Word if I need to. When you're choosing the right tools, it's kind of the same thing. When you establish policies around this, make sure everyone that comes to your team knows how you want them to use these tools. This is going to be something that you establish, but it's also going to be something that you reiterate because someone is going to forget at some point. Humans are the way they are. We can't remember everything all the time. So every now and then, make sure you're looking in there, taking accountability to make sure that things are being done the way that they need to be done, and then moving forward from there. Once everyone has their access that they need, tell your employees how this gets used. Again, training is an ongoing process. If you haven't told it to them at least 10 times, they are not going to remember it. Try not to get frustrated. It's just the way that humans are. I usually ask the smart people to tell me things at least 10 times using small words and, as if they were talking to a 5-year-old, because that's usually my level of understanding on things. And then don't be afraid to have it fail and then have to improve it. I wrote a series of project tracking bots for my training staffs. There are at least 6 of them now. The first iteration of them were so hard to use for them because they didn't understand what it was asking of them, and they didn't understand how to access it. We had a big meeting where I solicited a bunch of feedback. I set up a feedback tool to get the most common things, and I rewrote all of them entirely because they weren't working. I liked them, but they weren't working. Now we have a 2.0 version of this that people like a lot better because as soon as they call it, it tells them on the card exactly what it's looking for at all times. And if you put in the wrong thing, it throws an error and says, hey, you did this, I'd like you to do this. Because humans make mistakes, except for me. All right, let's talk to the next one. Next steps, love this slide. Try to find 2 things that you can implement to improve the work lives of the people you're responsible for. Back to contractualism and what we owe to each other. You owe the rational people on your team what they need to get their jobs done. They owe you the products that you show to other people and then take credit for as management because that's what we do. Wait, did I say that last part out loud? Anyway, that's kind of how we roll. Identify when you're going to take action and also hold yourself accountable to when you're going to take that action. If you're going to do it in Q2 FY26 and you're not making it there, go back to that first step and say, let me make sure that I'm defining this correctly. Let me make sure that I've identified the right tools to use and that I can move forward with it. And then if you need help, if you want to collaborate, if you want to involve your employees, which I highly recommend, please bring them into the conversation early to find out what they actually want. Give a couple of them UAT access to whatever you're working on so they can help you identify the problems and you don't make it everyone else's problem then. But let's go on to the summary. All right, this is the part where we restate those objectives. Really hope you guys understand that knowledge management is important at this point, that you'll take away some contractualism. And if you apply it, great. If you don't apply it, I'm not going to know, so it's okay. I find it important. You might find a different framework more helpful. And then lastly, that assessment of processes and the data sets that you have, that's something you'll take as that action going from here. All right, and then I think we have a references slide. I highly recommend checking out that first article. It summarizes Scanlon's writes-up of contractualism, his books, What We Owe to Each Other, and I think there's another one called like Responsibility, Blame, and a couple other things. But that's something I'd highly recommend. All right, and then there's that evaluation link that I think Elizabeth has given you. And looks like I'm going to owe some people some answers here. Charles and Whitney, I will add a message to this that answers both of those. But unfortunately, I think we're probably all overdue to something by now. Thanks for giving me your time, everybody. I hope to talk to you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. We appreciate your time and expertise today. And to our participants, thank you so much for your engagement in this training. If you have a moment to complete that evaluation we mentioned, that will be greatly appreciated. I will be sending out an email afterwards. I'll include the link to our SharePoint so you can access this recording in a few days, as well as the slides that we looked at today. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful day.